Board Gaming Podcast. My name is Sweetest Watchshot, and I'm joined with my guest host, Kaity.
Hello.
We're going to talk a little bit about a local board game sale, and we're going to talk about our big meaty topic, which is your trip to Essen. Mm-hmm. And we have no questions from the mailbag this week. We've kind of buzzed through those, so if you want to ask a question, please do email us. And then we're going to each discuss a couple of games we've recently played. And that's going to be part one, and you'll be back for a part two, and we'll talk about that then. This is October 22nd. We are recording this on 2024. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where you fit in the community?
Sure. My name is Kaity Bequette, and for the last 7-ish or so years, I have been the co-chair, or at least helped out with Cudo Plays, a local board game design competition. During that time, we help people create board games from start to finish. The third season or so is my first year doing it, and I made a board game as a part of the competition. And then since then, we've just been kind of in the community helping people make board games and also holding local game nights and things like that. I'm one of the only people on the committee that happen to have a master's degree and already work for the university, so I started teaching the Intro to Board Game Design course at the University of Illinois.
I'm just going to stop you real fast. So we're going to, in part two, our major topic is going to be talking about Cudo Plays, just so you, so if you're wait, we should have talked about that. But go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead, your university.
Yep. So I teach the class at the university, and I think I'll be teaching it next spring. I guess we'll see, depending on how enrollment goes. I'm trying to make it a 16-week course right now, but in the community, I help out with Cudo Plays, and then I also play test games when I get a chance, and also I love going to board game conventions to demo games for my friends who work at Elf Creek Games. So
yeah, that's a dream job, teaching at a university about board games. That's a pretty awesome gig. Yeah. I think hopefully we'll have you on in the future and we can chat about that a little bit. So you mentioned Elf Creek Games. Their big game is Atlantis Rising, right?
I think it's their big game personally.
Well, what's in the competition? What's in the running in the competition?
Oh gosh, Honey Buzz by Paul Salmon is wonderful. It's a worker placement game, a worker bee placement game where you're making honey for the queen and selling it and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I fell in love with Atlantis Rising, so yeah. So
I think you might be a little biased. So when Dan Dudley was on, we were talking about the idea of Fantasy Flight has these. If you're there for 5 years, you get your own artwork and stuff. And, very few people have their artwork in board games now. Some of the big board game reviewers and stuff get their own promos and stuff available through either their Kickstarters or Board Game Geek. But that aside, most people don't have that. But I did bring along to show this is the artwork. This is your character, the Artificer. So did you have some input into which character you got to be?
Yes, actually. They just made me and actually my friend David the Artificer. I think because they didn't have art for it yet, so that's the first thing. And then also it was my favorite counselor to play. So they kind of set up this contest as we were playtesting, be the girl and the guy who playtested it the most will get to be our Artificers. And it was no contest with me, but I think it was, between my friend David and my friend Zach who got it. Our friend David did, so congrats to him. But yeah.
That's pretty neat. Now, do you feel pressure when you play the game? You're I gotta be my own character, or do you can you mix it up a little bit?
I frequently don't actually play through the game myself. If I do it now, it's typically let's see, the last time I actually played the game where I wasn't sure if we were
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It looks a little laggy, but
so most of the time, sorry about that, I just had a little audio issue there. So you're saying most of the time when you were playing the game.
Yes. The last time I played the game and wasn't sure, actually genuinely playing it, not sure if we were going to win or lose, it was with the designer and co-designer, and we were playing on hard mode. And I typically do like to play the Artificer. I do like to play myself, but it's a challenge to play other roles. When I am encountering the game, usually I'm demoing it at different conventions and stuff, and I do have my set of counselors that I like to set out because they are kind of what I identify as the Justice League of Atlantis, and they're much easier to their powers are easier to grok upon teaching. So I can typically do the 15-minute teach and then be there for a couple of turns and people will get it. Do you mind if I show you who they are? Is that okay?
Yeah, well, first actually, before we do that, I wanted to now I don't have any involvement in the game at all. I played it a couple of times, that's it. But it's almost a little unfair because I actually think like one of the characters I think looks a lot like me. So I feel like I kind of in like a cheaty kind of way, I almost have my own art in the game as well. I can't remember which, no. Oh yeah, this guy right here. This is very similar.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
So
do you see the
weird.
resemblance though?
I do. I see
a little bit of the resemblance.
there.
Yeah, it looks a bit like me, which kind of seems unfair in a way. You know, like that I have no involvement in the game, and yet. So you want to show me your?
Very clever. Well, the Guardian is one of them. So
that's one of the people.
Guardian, the Explorer.
Hold on, you have to pull it down a little so
oh yeah, sure. Let me see here.
This is the Justice League. We're getting a little bit of what do you call it? Like a tech game? Like it's like a.
So at least starting with these guys is kind of not the Scholar. Oh my gosh,
obviously not the Scholar.
She's too complicated. You start by reading and you should never stop reading. Like it takes a lot of time. But yeah, these guys are typically the people that I set folks up with when I'm teaching the game. And I'll flip them so you can also see their alternative gender side.
It's uncanny though, right?
Right, it's weird. Yeah, we have to talk to Vincent Dutray about that. I always thought he looks like Doctor Strange.
Vincent Dutray. I mean, he's the king right now,
Yes.
right? Is there anybody bigger for art, like a more sought after? Really?
I don't know. I recognize his art anywhere I see it. I think he recently did the Lord of the Rings duel game, the 2-player game.
I've not played that yet.
Yeah, I have not either.
Yeah.
But
so, we have a little agenda here, but we don't have to stick right to that. I wanted just to take a little bit of rabbit hole because I love talking about game design, obviously, and that and just the choices and things. And this is always something I find very fascinating for games like this and cooperative games, really in general. The idea of like different characters are going to have different power levels, right? And so, like if you have something now, this is a little different because you could recommend in the rule book take these 5 characters to start if you're playing your first game. But if it's like an IP game, and that's like, this is Luke Skywalker, this is Han Solo or whatever, do you give those popular characters like a better ability, like more powerful because they're going to get picked more often and the earlier games people will do better and hence like the game more? Or do you give the better powers to the offshoot characters that aren't as popular to get people to play them?
I think I'd give, honestly, the better powers to the offshoot characters just so people tend to discover them. And that's kind of like what happens with like some of our like characters that are like off screen here. Like they are, this one's not so powerful, but they are super powerful, but it just takes kind of a minute to be able to grok exactly like what their powers are and how they are good together. Like I love pairing these two together. The astrologer tells the future so they don't place their workers until after the misfortunes have happened, and then our aquanaut / seafarer can go to drowned tiles, and when they go together I call it the time travel boat. And like that's a really, really broken like technique that it kind of takes a playthrough or two to actually understand. But I mean, if you look at Harry Potter, the Defending Hogwarts games, that cooperative game.
Is that that's one that takes like, you can play each book?
Yes. And I've only played it once and it was hard, but I assume that they stack Harry and the trio basically with all the powers that you need. But yeah, I definitely hide the good powers in the people that are more difficult to understand so you can get a couple of playthroughs in.
So I'm a little older than you, so generationally, like Harry Potter wasn't part of my like generation, right? So, but I mean, that's such a amazing, and this is going to make sense for game design in just a second. But those books, essentially, they start off if you're like a person that doesn't know this, very rare person that doesn't know this, they start off very, very simple, and they grow. Maybe mature is the right word, right? Where they get more mature, right? Like in their writing and the characters growing and stuff, which is brilliant. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant. As the reader grows, so does the story grows to suit them. Now, how game design works, because you brought up this Harry Potter game, which I've never played. I didn't read the books. I watched some of the movies. I don't really care that much about Harry Potter. But what a great system, because you could take the game and each of the books is essentially like, hey, you're getting to understand the game, and then each of the scenarios getting more involved and intricate as you get more experience with the game, mirroring the books. It's like kind of like a really interesting parallel. I think that's so. Did you play all the books in that? Or?
I have not actually. I played book 3 and it was very difficult. My favorite book, but for some reason in the movies it's like right when things turn and get very serious, and I think that also happens in the books as well. Although it's the only It's the only book where you don't have Voldemort, so yeah, and like
Okay. A little spoiler alert
yeah,
for you.
the highest high happens in there, and it's really cool. But it is a very, very difficult version of the game. So, but I was lucky to be in like that like generation where I actually did age along with the books, which was pretty cool. But the game seemed difficult, and I haven't gone back to it since I had like kind of a tough time playing that first time. But
That's interesting because co-op games, which Atlantis Rises is a co-op game, right? Like, that's a very, that's a fine balance, right? You have to have it challenging enough where people don't steamroll it.
Yep.
But if you lose too often, then people don't want to play because they get frustrated by
yeah.
it. When you win that co-op game early on, like some people are just like, oh, we won, we're done, and I'm like, didn't you enjoy playing it? Wouldn't you want to play it again?
Yeah. It's very much like an escape room too. Like you want to like secretly have the solve rate or have the success rate be really, really high. And so people will ask me, it's like, how often is the lose rate for this game? And I'll be like, it's not, but it always gets down to like the game is, an island with like 6 legs on it and then like a center to the island. And I say it always does get down to like the donut of doom no matter what you're doing. It always almost completely floods. People always like just barely make the cosmic gate and save everybody. So it's important to very much like balance that. And then of course when I do the teach, I show people how to like turn it up or turn it down, make it easier or make it more difficult if they have a good co-op group that they'd like to play with.
So you didn't really answer the question though.
What's the question?
The question, no, I mean about like when you say people ask you what the win rate is, like what is
when I observe, if I'm teaching it, people normally win if they're smart and listening to me, because
and not playing the game.
Well, they're playing the game, and I just like set it up, and
you're
then,
there to like you're like Navi and Zelda. You're like, hey,
yes,
maybe
hey,
go
listen.
there.
Yeah, exactly. Between like when they get up to like round 1, I'm like, okay, as you place your Atlanteans, you should talk to each other and see what you need and tell people what you have, and then ask people questions and how you can work together. And then positive reinforcement is a great, like, it's wonderful. People really, really like that. And so I'll be like, good job, counselors. And they really, really attach to that, which is good.
Nothing makes people want to continue something like success.
Honestly, yeah.
Okay, but what do you, so before we move to the next subject,
Sure.
What do you think is the best, what do you think a win rate should be on a co-op game? Like, what if your knee-jerk, what's the rate?
I'm kind of like with my friends who run escape rooms on this, and I do believe that you should win more than you lose.
Like 75%?
Yeah,
You think
at
so?
least.
Interesting.
Like, the first time I played this game, like the very, very first time when it was still in its first edition, I lost it, and I was like, "Bring that to game night tomorrow." And they.
But
did.
that's the thing with a co-op game. When you're like when you get close, but you don't quite win. You're like, let's do it again, and you get to say, hey. What are we going to do differently? And that I think is for me the hallmark of what makes the game exciting is like you talk like, okay, I think we can win it, and this is my plan how or whatever. I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about. So they had a board game. So actually, again with Dan Dudley, one of our guests, prior guests, at the Titan local shop here in Champaign, they had a board gaming sale, like a used board gaming sale. When they do this every year.
Yeah.
And I'm just bringing it up because I think there's some interesting facets to it, or some things that you can talk about that I find like very, very interesting. But also, if you have a game shop, in your area, like this is something that if they don't do it, you could recommend. Or if you're just getting into the hobby and you're listening to this podcast, which is a bit of a niche podcast about the board gaming culture, but this is a great opportunity to get a lot of games, And I think that. They had something like 200 people drop off games. So both for the gamer, for the shop, it's great because they're selling games. They're making a cut on the games, right? And then, and if they don't sell, they don't sell. So it's not stock that's going to sit. And then for the gamer, you could be like, oh, I'll buy this game I'm not sure about, and then I can sell it at the game sale if I don't like it. Or, so I think it really works for both. Have you been to one of these sales before?
Listen, is it going to ruin your podcast if I say, no, I did not make it to this most recent sale? I'm so sorry.
Shut everything down.
Okay.
Shut it all down.
Sorry. I did not make it out, but I did get plenty of Snapchats from friends who are just like, you would like this version of Monopoly that's like boutique themed. And I'm like, trick question, I like no versions of Monopoly, but I appreciate
that was the test. I'm like, this is like almost like a test. It's pretty interesting though. Like, I mean, they had like something like 200 people drop off multiple games a piece, so there was a lot there. But there's a few interesting things about it. Number one, there's a ton of games there where you're just like, they're like $1 or $2 or something, and you think, man, the designer of this game was probably like, I've worked for 10 years on this and I can't wait to like, to become a success. And it's just like if you wrote a book and it's like, at the free book sale or whatever, So it's a bit sad, the $1 game, the $2 game that nobody really wanted, kind of like a bit sad.
Oh yeah, I mean, board game sales are like a hallmark now of like conventions too. I know at Gen Con they have a very large board game auction, and that has like more rare things as well. And then Geekway to the West kind of like famously also has a used board game sale, but also the things that people actually want are typically like private trades and stuff. So
well, they have the at Gen Con, the math trade or whatever, which is that's a whole subject on its own, which is really fascinating. It's like, this is the kind of trade that gamers make for themselves. So I think that's kind of cool. But it's a great opportunity. Like, so I'm very neurotic. I don't like to buy, like I'm like Howard Hughes. I'm not buying somebody's copy that they've been using and stuff. But there's a couple of things about it, because like the game shop itself will throw in copies of games that aren't selling, and they'll just mark them down big time, And there's a Saturday price and there's a Sunday price.
Yeah.
So when you go, you'll say, I want $20. Sunday I'll take $10 or whatever, right? And so like you might say, well, maybe I'll come back tomorrow and see if it's still here, and then I'll get it or whatever. But like I was able to get a few items. I mean, I'm not going to go through my list or whatever, but I bought a game because they had really good components, really fascinating components, and I'm like, it was $5, and I'm like, don't tell this designer, but I'm like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to get some pieces if I want to do like, I do a lot of stuff for wargaming and stuff, terrain and stuff. So I'm like, this is great for that. Yeah. I got the Case Files, one of my favorite podcasts, and they put out a game. It was like in Target or something, and I was like, I don't think this is going to be any good. I love the podcast, but I'm like, but it was like $5. So I'm like, you know what? Let's try it. And also out of print stuff is very interesting because I found a game, Warsaw, and it's been out of print for a really long time, and I was really interested in trying it. It looks very interesting because it's about the history of Warsaw a bunch, and I'm like, well, you know what? It's out of print. This is an opportunity to get it. Somebody just unloaded it, which is kind of cool. And do you remember the game Golem Arcana? Do you have any memory of that?
Ooh, I know Res Arcana, but not Golem Arcana as much.
Yeah, Res Arcana. Well, Res Arcana. Yeah. But it had this like whole revolutionary way of like doing the range and stuff for wargaming, and it was like the people that made that's like a technological thing, right? Where like you think of like tech stocks and things where those are really volatile because will that tech do really well or will it not do well? And this is one of those things where they really kind of felt like this is going to be the wave of the future. And now it's sitting on the used board game table. Didn't go anywhere. It's kind of interesting. And lastly, like it's a great thing about like unlocks. The mystery test style games that you kind of play through once and you're done with them. Like you can't play them again. Yeah. And that's like, you see a lot of that there too.
They get a second life.
They do get a really, and I think that does help for people buying them. Because like, I mean, obviously the Exit the Game series, which I find to be my favorite, you destroy them, the pieces, so you can't play them again. But it's kind of a nice, again, I think do you think it incentivizes you to buy games like that if you feel like you'd be able to turn them over again?
Certainly. I have tended to stay away from used board game sales just because I'm trying not to buy more board games, and also everybody within Cudo Plays, our collections are kind of spec'd differently, and so mine are very much like the games that are beautiful, that are easy to explain, kind of like First Hits Free, and then my friends have kind of the more complicated games. But there is one that I am looking to get, and I don't know if I ever will. It's out of print, and it's called Indigo, and it's a path game, and it's just beautiful.
Indigo? I don't think I know that.
No, it's so out of print.
Gone,
it's so gone. Oh, and then one called Bambolio, which is a dexterity game, and they're from pre-Catan era, and they're gorgeous and they're European, and I don't know if I'll ever find a copy of them. But it is a good reminder to start going to these used board game sales just to see someone makes a terrible mistake, and then I get one of those copies. It's pretty cool.
Well, it is also kind of cool that you get to go and it's you go to your local game shop all the time, at least I do, and it's kind of a nice opportunity to see a whole new selection that you didn't see before. So I think that's kind of cool. But anyway, so, ask your local game shop, hey, because it's a great opportunity or whatever. Andrew, who was our last guest, he's like a super go-getter, and he'd probably be like, I'll put my own on. So I think that's kind of a cool thing. Okay, so we are going to transition now into our big topic, which is Essen. Now, the reason, I think people obviously, if you don't know, Essen is like the biggest board gaming convention in the world.
Yes.
You know, you think of Gen Con, well, this is, you know, Gen Con is a lot of things, and this is specifically board gaming. And it's in Germany, and you had the opportunity to go, but one of the so on its own, that's interesting to talk about. Okay, but the reason, and you know, I keep doing this with my guests, trying to get people to have these interesting perspectives. Now, I think for me, when I would think of who goes to a convention like Essen, I think like publishers, for sure. And then you think of fans, for sure. That's what I think of. But you have a really unique role in the fact that you went with Elf Creek Games.
Yeah.
And you are, you know, able to, you know, you're in between those two, right? Like, and it's a really interesting perspective. I think it'd be interesting for people to hear about that experience and how it differs from the other experiences.
Sure. Well, we know that Essen, largest board game convention in the world. The culture for like board game and board game purchasing is a little bit different in Europe just because of like shipping costs and things like that. So if people are going to buy games, they're going to buy it at Essen. People come in with suitcases and with hand carts, and we'll stack the games up on those hand carts and have like graph paper that has lists on them, and they will like address these lists and have them and bring them to like each booth and like literally cross them off as they're there. So people come with intention.
And you think that's you, I mean, surely that's a lot. I've never been to Gen Con. I mean, that's probably a lot of that at Gen Con.
We gotta get to Gen Con. It's so good. There's a lot of like casual walkers at Gen Con unless there is a new hotness, like a game that everybody wants, in which case there are lines. And like that can happen at Essen. I didn't see a lot of it because I was mostly in the Elf Creek booth. So my unique perspective was very much like demoing a game as it was on the table. They usually have me talking about Atlantis and then also talking about Honey Buzz, the worker bee placement game, and then its expansion Fall Flavors. So my perspective was very much just using the skills I have developed from demoing Atlantis Rising everywhere, basically like giving the teach kind of truncated, showing people how it works, showing people what the crux of the game is, and then kind of doing that same thing for Honey Buzz as well. But Honey Buzz also sells itself because it's so beautiful, and a lot of people are a fan of the original game, and so the expansion kind of like helped like sell itself too, which was a lot of fun. But for Essen, people are looking to...
Can I just interrupt you before you get too far up?
Sure.
You were talking about that table presence. I mean, we actually just talked about this on the last couple of episodes, the idea of like these, if that game looks gorgeous on the table, that's a big deal. I mean, that draws people. And we were talking about the idea of like having more elaborate or more, like we're talking about like photosynthesis with all the trees, those kind of things, like really eye-catching, you know, that's such an important part of gaming, really. And you're saying, you know, Honey Buzz has that, you know, has that appeal.
It does. I think Atlantis does too, but especially if we have the play mat out, it's just gorgeous. But there's definitely been a trend of like tall table presence games, so like photosynthesis, and one Gen Con everybody was buying that wacky crane game where you put the crane like on your head and then you have to like catch the hook with something. That
Did you play that?
I did not. It has a lot of table presence.
Yeah.
So, but
It seems like weird at Gen Con because it seems like, you know, that's like a, you know, that's a party game where everybody's moving. I always think of Gen Con as being like so packed you would, you know, not be able to do that.
You gotta come. You gotta check it out for yourself. It's great. I promise.
Yeah. So okay, so you're demoing games at for Elf Creek Games. Yes.
And not demoing so much as like being behind a table and just like explaining how turn order works on Atlantis Rising, and then also explaining all the different things for Honey Buzz and then why the expansion is new. A lot of what Elf Creek kind of like sells itself on is not only like the intuitive gameplay, that's like, you know, the crux of like an evergreen game. It's also like the bits. They make a lot of games that have very nice like components to it, and so those are very much out on the table. You try and keep people's hands on them if you can, to be like, here, touch this. It's the only fuzzy bee meeple that you're ever gonna see.
Wait, they have a fuzzy bee?
They do.
Because my Honey Buzz has no fuzzy bee.
They're a deluxe component.
So do you think that like is a, like for people, that normal people, you think that's not like a bait and switch? I don't think it's a bait and switch. Obviously you want to put your best presence forward on the table, but like, do you think when people look at that, they like perceive that value, but then they don't get, and do you say like, hey, just so you know, like this, and this are not included?
Yep, and that's all prepared. Like we keep like definitely like a cluster of the standard pieces and a cluster of the deluxe pieces like separate from each other to be like, these come in this, these are this, these are the standard pieces are still good. So yeah.
Well, they are. I mean, I have Honey Buzz. I do. It is a nice package. But I want to go back to something you said a second ago about you made a distinction, and I'm like, I don't know this distinction. You said, I said demoing because I just assume that's what it is. And you said, I don't demo. You point these things out. And I'm like, what's the distinction there? What is the...
Sure. So we had like, the booth was packed with games, so we actually didn't have much room to like have a table to sit down and like demo a game at. So when I think about demoing, it's like, yeah, actually being able to sit down with the game, have other players there, and then be able to go through a few turns with those players using the game. And for us, we kind of like had the game on a table in front of us, and then I was able to kind of just like articulate what a turn was using our friends, the counselors, because they have like the round steps on there, and then kind of like showed the misfortune deck and like a turn that happens, and you're still able to sell games that way. But if I had been able to like actually sit down, demo Atlantis Rising, I guarantee you more would have gone. And that's what people want to, but we had like a limited space in the booth because we're coming all the way from America, and then we had a lot of product just in the booth as well, so not a lot of room to actually demo games. But I guess I did kind of like demo it in a limited sense, but would have felt more true if I'd been able to like sit down with people.
So if I understand, you're kind of saying, hey, this is how the game works. These are the things you're going to be doing. It's more like a live trailer, whereas like a demo, in that you're saying that is the best way for people to sit down and actually play through a few turns. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. But so if you're like a publisher or something listening or something, that's something to understand that but you have a very limited space.
That's what we had, at Elf Creek. So, yeah.
I mean, I would imagine most people. So, now this Atlantis Rising is something that you've been demoing, actually demoing, and what would you say your job? What is the term for?
You can say demoer. I think that's fine. I don't know what the actual term is for me with Elf Creek. I call it friend employee, but
friend employee. Okay, so like demoing the game. Now this is a game that is. I mean, they had a reprint, so they had the initial one, and then it went out of print, this is maybe 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago?
I think so.
And then it had a re-updating of its, right?
Yeah, this is the second edition that was released by Elf Creek, yeah.
And so, it's interesting, and you mentioned Evergreen, right? Evergreen Games, which apparently this is an Evergreen game.
They try, yeah. So games like Catan and stuff that kind of don't go out of style. Although there is even a new edition of Catan called Catan New Energies, which I think is more cognizant of the types of motivations people have these days for developing land, whereas Catan being itself an island with no inhabitants that you get to build on is not something that really makes sense anymore. So
okay, I do want to talk about Katana with that a little bit, but first, so I want to just finish the other point, which is now, do you find a lot of people that you talk to and stuff are like, hey, I played this, I own it, or I demoed it last year, whatever. Do you find people are still like, oh, what's this game? They don't know about it. I'm kind of curious, what kind of shopper is there at SN that's
Some people still didn't know about it, and so that's always fun to pitch to people. You get a couple of different reactions, or I get a couple of different reactions when I'm talking about this game, pitching it and demoing it, because sometimes people are just like, oh, I hate co-ops, and they just walk away. And I'm like, no, this one's different, I promise. Or rolling for resources is also a huge turnoff to some people as well. They're like, oh, forget this. And I'm like, no, you can mitigate it with Mystic Energy, I promise.
But that's another similarity to Catan.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, people kind of have a bad taste in their mouth because of some of those things, but some people come up and they are co-op gamers, they've heard about it and they're really interested in it, and I give them kind of the spiel, and they're very into it and can buy everything about it, which is great. And then there is an expansion called Monstrosities, which I don't have here today, unfortunately, but it's just adding in 3, I think, Greek monsters into the mix as well. There's more monsters than that, and of course there's more expansions, more different components and areas you can go to. So
you think that expansion helps, because to me, I would think if I went to SN, I would see this and be like, well, yeah, I mean, I know it, I understand, it seems especially board gaming culture now in the past bunch of years or whatever, it's all cult of the new, right? I mean, the last 10 years it's been give me the new game. So it's kind of interesting. I mean, you said new expansions and stuff, but it is kind of interesting that Honey Buzz is another old. I mean, that's probably 5 years old, right?
Yeah.
Now at this point. So both those games seem it's interesting that I think most publishers probably want to go and be like, hey, here's the new games. Yes. The company that I can think of that that had a different approach for that was North Star Games. Instead of are you familiar with them?
I'm not actually.
They did Wits and Wagers and Evolution, and their kind of idea was forget every single year developing all these new games. Let's just keep pushing these big games, like that they have, like approachable games, like Wits and Wagers. And so it's interesting, like, it sounds like Elf Creek Games has more of a similarity with North Star Games' way of doing it than other. It's kind of interesting, actually.
Yeah, right now, definitely. There are like some new games that are in development, like in the docket. And you're right that Essen is kind of like a cult of the new type of place. Like people are wanting to see what's new. We did have a few people come up to the booth and be like, I already have all of this. Okay, see you later. And they're like, what's happening with the new stuff? And we'd be like, we don't know yet. So, yeah.
Interesting. So I think people will be interested also, might be like, hey, that sounds awesome. Go to Essen, right? Like, but I mean, demo games, I'm guessing you have some time to go and look at the show as well, right? And so I think like if somebody's thinking to themselves, I want to do that, they probably want to know, like, am I an employee? Am I getting paid? Am I getting flown over there? Am I getting a hotel room? I mean, you don't have to talk about this if that's private things. I can cut this, of course.
That's fine.
I shouldn't have said that there. That was a mistake. But those are some questions. Some people might be like, that sounds amazing. I'd love to do that. Is that something like, is this a unique thing that you have, or is this like kind of a common industry thing?
I'm actually not entirely certain because Elf Creek is the only like publishing company that I've worked for. But yeah, they did fly me out there and like pay for the hotel there, and that's partially like why I went, because I'm just like, yes, absolutely, trip to Germany, you got it. All I have to do is like demo board games and then look at amazing other like European board games and like German toys and stuff. Oh no. So it was a good time, definitely because of that, and that's part of the motivation for being able to go. I don't see myself planning an international trip like anytime like immediately. Oh, except for the spring. I'm going to Japan with my friends in the spring. But yeah, this kind of came up and I was like, yeah, sure, I would love to. So yeah, that is part of it, and part of what was paid for by the publishing company. And I think that is industry standard, but don't quote me because I'm not entirely sure.
Interesting. That is a lot more expensive, like bringing out a bunch of volunteers. But of course, like, I think of like the very limited times I've had any kind of like demoing situation. I remember like there's a Winter Wars, a convention that was here, and they had like 3 or 4 people, that were doing like a demo thing. And I remember like the guy was, I was just like, oh, cool. What is this? And he was like, well, the spots are full. You can't. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was just like kind of asking him some questions. He was really rude and not interested. I mean, I was like, this is weird. So like, I obviously didn't change my opinion about like, I think it was Conan I was talking about, which I have on, I Kickstarted or whatever. But this is like, I'm like, what? That is so important, right? That point person is like that go-between. You've worked all the logistics, you've designed the game, you've done all the work, and then somebody can really spoil that experience. So it seems to be a really important, like, your role in the whole thing, right?
Yep, definitely like delivering it to people. And like, yeah, I've had people who have separate experiences with the game and have not had a good time, and then like attend, like at Gen Con, I typically also work for them to run demos of Atlantis and whatever other game they need me on. And so that guidance definitely like helps people. And, I do a little bit kind of like of the narrative as it's happening too, which I think affects people as well. So yeah, it can really kind of live or die on who actually is like selling the game to you. And when I'm demoing at cons, I definitely kind of can solve things a little bit nicer than I normally would. But I'm usually like, well, for the future, just reread this rule and see how it would resolve. But you guys want to win for now, so.
So overall, like, I mean, would you say like it's a lot more work than fun? Like, is like, is it like a half and half thing, or do you think you?
It's hard to say. Like, I have a lot of fun talking about this game. It is like my favorite game. They got very, very lucky that I love to tell people about it, and I love to kind of like prove its worth and tell people what's good about it. So I have a lot of fun doing that. Let's see. But it is a lot of work too. I was able to walk around, we got like 2-hour or so breaks to walk around, and Essen is huge. I don't know if we can even like relate how big it actually is. It's 200,000 people, more than that, and then it's 6 different halls of games. So just as an attendee, I don't know how you make it through absolutely everything. It's overwhelming and it's wonderful. So there's kind of like, it's nice to have a booth to go back home to, kind of, where there are other Americans who I know, who I can talk to, and who like know what's going on. And also it's fun to have like a home game and a home world that you understand. And luckily, like, this understanding and also the other games I've played, like, you know, really lead to a bit of a common language, even in a place where a lot of people speak a different language. So it definitely was like more work than play, but at the same time, I truly do love kind of like explaining this game and why it's good to people, especially to people who get it, especially to other co-op gamers and like even like some skeptics too. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it's all interesting. Like it's just like such a, like, I think about it and I'm like, you know, for me personally, like, you know, I just want to go. I would just want to go and enjoy the experience, right?
Yeah.
But like some people might be like, hey, that does sound cool to be involved in some, you know, in some way. Some people like to have that kind of task to keep them focused in a way, you know, like some people like when they travel. To me, like if I was going to go to like across the pond and I'm going to go to Essen, I would rather just go on vacation, and I would rather, you know, just buy board games or go to a convention here and enjoy that. So that's kind of, to me, is like it's like peanuts and bubble gum in the same, you know, in the same bite, right? It's not really like as effective for me, but I think like people might say like, hey, that's kind of cool. And also I wonder like if people would think to themselves, like, if I get in good, you know, with a small company, like maybe, you know, then I get a little friendly with them, and then maybe my design can get, you know, can get a look taken out of it. That was a weird way to say that, but like, you know, that's a kind of like an in, getting your foot in the door. So there could be like lots of reasons to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, to me, like, I would rather just go to the con and enjoy it and stuff, or I'd rather just go to travel. But for you, it's a nice balance. It sounds like you had a nice...
I did. I do love having an exhibitor badge pretty much anywhere I go, to be able to get in there early and to like hang out. A big thing at Essen, which we did not take advantage of, which if I ever go again, I'm definitely going to take advantage of it. We just weren't aware of the culture. And then when we saw it happening, we're like, wait, what? Apparently, the exhibit hall for Essen closes. And we just like left with everybody else. Don't do that if you're an exhibitor. Hang out with the other exhibitors. They take over the hall at the end of the night and like hang out and play games and like eat.
So and you're allowed to stay in that area? Like...
That is what I heard
okay.
from people on TikTok. And then also that's what we witnessed too, like people starting to like bring out food as the hall was closing. But we were just, you know, kind of like scared Americans. So we're like, we need to go back to our hotel, get on the train, back to Balkum. But in the future, if I ever go again, I'm definitely going to be like, we're sticking around and playing some games and rubbing some elbows, getting to know people.
So there's no real, it's not like in the States, it's not like over there they go to the con, and then when the con's over, everybody goes home. There's no big after parties and stuff.
Yeah, well, that depends. For Gen Con, it's kind of like if you're a part of a certain publishing company, that publishing company might hold like a party or something, or manufacturers. I've seen that happen a little bit more. So there are like, parties held by different people, but you have to kind of like know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, here it seems like conventions of different, I mean, I'm more familiar with certain types of conventions, you know, film conventions and stuff. So, but other people like, you know, for Dragon Con, any kind of thing, stuff like that. I've been to a lot of Comic-Con stuff too. Like the show lets out and there's activities all night long to do, whether they're film fests, after parties, VIP parties, just people drinking in their rooms, everybody hang out in the lobby. You know, there's a huge after party. Like you could hang out all night and you could even not even go to the show and just do all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but Essen sounds like they're kind of like, okay, we're done, go home and get ready for tomorrow.
That's my experience, but that's also because in order to like go to Essen and stay in Essen, you have to book your rooms like a year in advance. So like we were actually in Bochum, which is like a 20-minute or so train ride away.
Okay.
And that happens to a lot of people. They have to like navigate to Essen.
But that's got to be like Germany. The German trains, like you're not waiting for it's like everything's all like like very easy. I would imagine too.
Yeah.
I've not been to Germany, but so speaking of Germany, so you kind of mentioned something and was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I hadn't considered really before you said it, but you know, what is it like to be your job is to, you know, is to demo, and I'm afraid to say the word demo games, but your audience is, I mean, this game has a lot of you know, a lot of text on the cards and stuff. Like, so I mean, like what's that experience like to talk, you know, to be selling and demoing with a non-English speaking or predominantly German speaking
we are pretty lucky because a lot of the like denizens of like the people who come to Essen to buy board games typically do speak English, which is very fortunate. And then we didn't have any like German language copies of the games at the booth, but like our partner Skellig, I think, had like a German copy of the expansion to Honey Buzz, and I think some people are still waiting on their German expansions of like Monstrosities as well. So they definitely, Elf Creek learns something with every game, and definitely with Atlantis Rising they learn to be less text heavy, because like text means translators, and that can take time and it can take money. So Honey Buzz, you'll see, is definitely a lot more iconography, and definitely more like picture focused, so that you can kind of like get how it plays without having to have like the translation. And a lot of more international games will do that, have like a minimal amount of like words or things on the actual components of the game, and then just have the rules in like several languages. Oink Games does that really, really well. So luckily for me, a lot of people understood me when I was describing it in English, and then like something weird that kind of happens, and it feels kind of silly to say, but it's true. Like you kind of like start to adopt this kind of like European kind of like Germanish accent that kind of like it makes more sense when you're trying to explain a game with lots of like steps and stuff. And so I think that helped, and you can like pepper in like some German things like, you know, what's nicht gut, what is sehr gut, and stuff like that. And it kind of like helps people understand it. But luckily a lot of people spoke English, and you know, it wasn't too kind of far off from what they understood.
Did you guys recruit anybody from Germany to?
We got somebody from the Netherlands. His name is Roger. He's amazing. And so he was so funny because he'd be like, okay, I don't speak a lot of German, and then he would just go and explain the game in German to somebody and be like, it sounds like you speak German, Roger. It sounds like you speak it really well. But then whenever we had some friends from the Netherlands come over, he was also there to explain to them in that language too, which was very, very fortunate.
It sounds like you could, but you could look up certain terms because you're going to be using the same stuff over and over again. So it seems like you could learn like specific words or whatever, and that might be kind of fun too, just to feel a little more cultured. So you mentioned a little bit about the German copies. Do you bring a lot of German copy? Like, what's the ratio of English to German language copies of Atlantis Rising or Honey Buzz or whatever?
At Essen in general, there's lots of like.
No, for you guys, like, do you bring a lot more German? I mean, it seems like you would.
We should. We did not have any German copies.
Oh, really?
We
Zero.
Just had
Okay.
English. Yeah. So, but that's for our distributors to consider. I'm not sure where that's coming from exactly, but no, we just have the English copies, and that's something that we had to like be frank with people and say at the
Be frank with people.
Yep.
Okay, so Andrew, so you touched on something else. Andrew from Tabletop Central and I were talking on one of the previous episodes about the idea of like, and this is kind of your perfect for this because you're Cudo Plays, you're teaching at the university, and you are in the game, connected to the publisher, to a publisher. I mean, do you think that it's possible, this is what we were going to talk about a little bit, to have like a universal iconography like for all board games, you know? I mean, certainly you see a die, maybe you roll a die, but like are there certain, like is there like a universal language so that everybody is just like, okay, this is what this means?
I have like two minds about this. Like one of me wants to be like frankly contrarian and be like, yeah, I think that is possible, and I think we're not too far off from being able to do it too. But that'll get a lot of flack on the internet probably because every language has edge cases. Cultures have different what we call signifiers and affordances. So like every culture has kind of like a different way they signal something. But I mean, you can tell from here that like there are some things that are just iconography on the bottom, and like there's some text to describe it as well. But hopefully by looking at it, you can see like 4 of these equals 1 of these. So I think that there
Sure, I mean that makes sense on for this particular game, but I think it is a universal. Like, let me give you an example.
Sure.
So I kind of cut you off. Did you want to finish your thought?
You're good.
I'm sorry.
Go for it.
I apologize.
You're good.
So I feel like here's an example. Like, discard a card. Discard a random card. Like, discard a card from your hand, discard a random card from your hand. Like, those are two things like, hey, universally, could we have a symbol for discarding a card or discarding a random card? Like, that's something like, and obviously, like, every game is going to have all kinds of crazy rules, and you can't, but there are certainly, like, a lot of commonalities, right? There's probably, like, and of course, you don't have to have them all, but, like, if you look at a sheet and you're like, okay, these 10 symbols, I know instantly this is roll a die, this is place a die, this is, I think that's kind of like, it's an interesting challenge.
I didn't really think about the word random and how you would kind of indicate that. That'd be difficult. I still think it might be possible. I think that it would be cool. What was Andrew's opinion? I listened to it, but apparently I didn't get
we just, I don't know, we talked about it a little bit, but I think it's kind of like we were talking about, like, hey, that'd be a great idea. I don't know. But I mean, logistically, like, even just going forward, you'd have to have everybody get on the same page about like what you were doing. But I wonder, I don't know how you would implement that or anything. It's kind of an interesting. That's a worm, like kind of not a wormhole, but a rabbit hole, some kind of hole, some kind of creature's hole.
Sure.
So, what do you think the biggest? I'm going to ask you a couple sort of generic questions about your experience. So. Number one, everybody's favorite question for Essen or Gen Con or anything is like, what were the standout games? What was the real winner? So maybe not that. Maybe if you had observed something being like very, very popular or like kind of like running, taking over Essen, if something like that, or just some games or things that you thought had a kind of a splash, maybe, because that's kind of, I know that's like a generic question to ask, but people like to know the answer to those things. Did you find something like that?
Oh yeah, there's one. I didn't get a copy of it, and I'm so bummed about it. I actually got the expansion in English, but I still haven't bought the actual like base copy of the game. It's called Sky Team, and it is a 2-person game where you are trying to land a plane together. And it is dice placement, and I'm just very, very excited to play it. I cannot wait. But I did get I intended to actually buy a copy of it there, but not only was the English version sold out, the German version was also sold out. And it was one of the ones I was like, I would get this in German just to be funny. I think it'd be kind of fun. But by that point, in the con when I was like, oh, I need to buy this, it was Saturday, and so all the copies had been sold out already. But that got second place in the Spiel des Jahres this year. So
no, it won the Spiel des Jahres. It won the Spiel des Jahres.
It won the Spiel des Jahres? I was incorrect. I apologize. Okay.
I think, and also that came out not this past Gen Con, but the Gen Con before. It was a pretty big release there. I love that game. I think it's amazing. But it's still going very strong, probably from that Spiel des Jahres buzz. It is interesting that award is so influential. Yes. I mean, whether or not it impacts us as gamers, being so into the hobby, normal people, do you think is that a big deal in Germany? You think it's a bigger deal for German people? If you have no idea.
Okay. On one hand, I'm not too sure, and on the other hand, it kind of speaks for itself, because I think that, in America, if we award, a game, there's kind of, you worry about, okay, who does the, game designer know? Yeah. Who has a deal with who in the industry? But, I don't know, I kind of trust the Germans to be very, to be very, very decisive about what games are actually good and which ones are not, just based on my experience with them, and seeing them kind of discuss games and talk about what they like and dislike about them. So I don't know what that says about me, sorry, but yeah, no, I think that I think that it won it on for a good reason, and you like it, so that's cool too.
What are there any other games that you felt were noteworthy Essen kind of games?
Let's see, there's one called Paleo that I also didn't get a chance to play, but it's where you're trying to
right there,
yeah, you have that one too.
It's a little older.
It looks cool.
Yeah. So it's getting a lot of buzz there as well.
Just a little bit, because I was walking around with my friend Roger, kind of after and during.
Netherlands Roger.
Yes, Netherlands Roger. Yeah. And then I also found a company that's Smart Kid Games that I grabbed a puzzle game from that I thought was kind of cool, that I have over here. And then of course I love Oink Games. I'm very brand loyal to them, so I picked up their new game Souvenirs in Venice too. And
we just talked about Oink Games on the last episode. I was blown away because they don't seem like a. My whole point was, I'm not going to reiterate, but it's just they hit 500,000 copies or something that they sold, and I was like, whoa, because they don't seem there's certain games obviously that are huge, Arcs was huge at Gen Con, there's just some games where you're okay, well, I could see that Stonemaier games, they always sell zillions of copies, Wingspan, there's things you expect to have huge sales numbers, but I was really kind of surprised about that. So we talked a little bit about them last episode. It's just in general, anything that you saw, you really, we're going to talk about games very shortly here, but is any other trends are interesting? I guess you could just anything interesting about Essen that you want to share that you haven't.
I mean, it's just like really, really kind of noteworthy the way that people buy games over there. And it is a selling convention. So they are looking for new things, and they are specifically trying to get their games for the year. So I don't know if there's like fewer like friendly local board game stores in Europe or anything like that. But I mean, it is tradition for people to bring like, suitcases to Essen to transport games.
That's fascinating. That graph thing, when you were talking, that sounds so interesting to me.
I'll send you some pictures about it. It's real interesting to like witness as well. But yeah, I can't really say like big splashy games, because I also like as a player kind of like tend to avoid those until they're like honestly verified by my friends, because my friends know my taste. They know the games that I like, and so once they have been vetted by that group, I can kind of go to them and be like, would I like this? And if they're like, Katie, you're gonna love this, you should have played it already, I'll be like, okay, yeah, you're right. So I tend to kind of like even just like avoid the games that are like huge and the new hotness until they kind of like trickle their way down to me. But Sky Team is one that people are like, Katie, you're gonna love it, and I'm like, oh, okay.
So what about other big differences between Essen and Gen Con? Like, so if somebody's been going to Gen Con or whatever, like what's the, I mean, you mentioned obviously like serious shoppers buying for the year, which is fascinating to me also. Like, it's like, you don't have a way to get these games otherwise. Like, it seems like really kind of a funny, but people get in there. But so that's very interesting. But I mean, just in general, like, what are some other major differences that you might expect?
It did feel like you were mentioning earlier, like there are less kind of like things to do after, and that might just be because we were in a foreign country and didn't have like whatever the RSS feed is for what other things are happening kind of after Essen. We had to get back to our hotel, which is in a different city. But it seemed like there are less kind of like offshoot events from Essen, whereas for Gen Con, I go to like demo games, and that's how I get my free badge, and like typically a hotel, and then I go to attend burlesque shows, because there are a lot of really, really good like nerdlesque shows and burlesque shows that happen at Gen Con. I love seeing everybody, and so there's a lot of other cool extracurricular things to go to. So I didn't get a lot of that in Essen, but again, it might just be because of like our like conditions for where we're staying. One thing I did notice, and it was so bizarre to me, is their lack of merchandise. Which this is going to sound so American, and it's going to sound so kind of material girl.
All right, let's hear it.
But like, it's okay. So what happened was, we know this, my suitcase got lost, very sad.
We talked about that off camera. Yes. So she had a big suitcase that did not arrive in Germany, and you're still waiting on it, which really sucked. When you travel and like you have all your stuff, which is a good rule. I always put like my glasses and my just like importance. I cannot like not have these items. I always bring them on.
Exactly. It was really silly of me to pack the way I did, but you don't anticipate to lose a luggage. So I am like, what I did in 2019 when I went to Essen is like one of the first things I did, bought a t-shirt, because I'm just like, we don't know if I'm ever going to make it to Essen again. Something in the air tells me I am going to want to buy a t-shirt here in the year of our Lord 2019. And I did, and it's one of my biggest nerd cred t-shirts. I love it so much. So that was one of my goals. I was like, I'm going to get an Essen 2024 t-shirt. And I go there, and they have this terrible AI cat that is their mascot. I shouldn't say it's AI. There was a big controversy last year that it was
like AI generated art.
Yeah, I still think it is. But so I just like this mascot a little bit. And so, there's a bit of a language barrier, and I'm just like, one t-shirt, please. And like, what size? And I'm just like, medium. They're like, we're out of mediums. And I'm like, of course. Because it was like Friday, late in the day. And I'm just like, okay, a large. And they take out the shirt with the cat on. And I'm like, absolutely not. I want the one that's just like the Essen logo with the meeples like coming off of it. And they were like, oh, we're totally out of those. And I'm like, how? I'm like, okay, that sucks. And I was like, what about that one? Like, what about the display shirt? And they were like, it's 2XL. And I'm just like, can I buy it? And they let me buy it, and I'm walking away with it like, dang, I have to make this into a t-shirt dress if I want to wear it out. And then it hit me like, Katie, you don't have any pajamas. You need this. You need this shirt to sleep in, actually.
It is culturally, like you mentioned, it is like, that's a thing, right? Like as America's like, we are going to, if you like this thing, we are going to give you every possible thing that you've never thought of to buy for this, right?
So
like,
they had 3 t-shirts, 2 with that terrible cat on them, 1 like nerdcore, just the logo with like game pieces. They had a mouse pad and like a Magic the Gathering pad and like a lanyard. But like what was really weird to me is that like they didn't have like an enamel pin, like that just has like the Essen logo and the year, which is kind of like the minimum that I would have expected. But also it was digital tickets, so they didn't have like a lanyard required. And if you go to we got to get you to Gen Con. If you go to Gen Con, they kind of they really are good at merchandising like the heck out of that thing. They have not only like the official Gen Con t-shirt with that theme, they have like, a femme version, they have kind of like more of like an anime version of all of them too, and then they have just like so many enamel pins that have different aspects of it, and then usually have deals with roll cards in different places. And I was expressing this to Norwegian friend Roger, and I'm just like, how do they not just have a simple
Netherlands friend or Norwegian?
Netherlands friend, I'm so sorry. Like, how do they not have just like a simple enamel pin just with like the logo that says the year that I can put on a lapel of something? And he's like, that's an American thing. And I'm like,
that's so funny, like those culture shock moments.
I just want to be able to show off merch from a place that I went to, and now I have to make a t-shirt dress about it.
It's like, this is kind of like when you go to the concert and you're like, and it's like you're like the first person at the merch booth, and you're like, I like that, and you're like, they're like, we've been sold out of that for 3 cities, like
why is the picture still up there?
Yeah, it is really frustrating, but yeah, that is that is like a cultural thing for sure. Do you think somebody should get this, do what you're doing, try to hook up with a publisher and demo? Or you think like, or do you think that it's better just to go, if you're not friends with the people, and just go and enjoy the trip?
I like doing it from like a money saving perspective. Sure, So, and like, I don't know if I would like independently work to like save up that amount of money to not only like travel internationally, but then also like have what I need to like buy a bunch of board games as well. So I advise it just to be able to like travel, meet different people, see a lot of different board games, kind of like for a lower cost, which is a lot of fun. But so I advise it, but also it's not for everybody. Con days can be long and hard, and I just happened to kind of like have the personality developed to be able to like really do it. And also I love this game, so that also helps with it too.
So if you have like a favorite game and you also would like a little help with the expenses, and you feel like you can pitch a game, that is actually kind of an interesting so that's a pretty unique person to but I'm sure there's people out there that's like the perfect kind of thing for.
Oh yeah.
So let's any final thoughts about Essen?
Let's see. The bread in Germany is so good. Oh my god, it's so good. What do they put in our bread here? I don't know, but the bread in Germany is fantastic. And Essen is just a really cool time. They also have interesting food other than the bread as well. And you just get to see.
Do they have like the food trucks like they do at Gen Con, or is it like all in the hall?
They do have food trucks, and they're all in like a central hall that's kind of like open air, and it's very cool, very European.
Well, you said this is kind of There's a little quick aside about like the fact that you just, your personality type and stuff. And I was like, so it's all the time I gotta like think to myself, like, don't talk over this person, give people room to, because I'm very like, I'm a bit much. And like, as soon as I got the bandwidth of the camera, and I'm working on like making sure we're going through, and I look at the time occasionally, make sure we're on track for time and stuff. And like, if I get a little tired and winded from the whole thing, like then I start maybe talking to, and someone else on the last couple of episodes, I was like, afterwards I was like, oh my god, I didn't, that's the first to go out of me, right? But I was like, if you're on, I'm like, you will just be like, boom, 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 going. I won't have to worry about it as much, because you have a good, you're a very
forceful personality.
You're a very big personality. Okay, so why don't we chat a little bit about some games we played. So as I say, we're out of questions for the mailbag, so please do send some in if you have anything. So wait, before that though, did you come back with like a suitcase of games? Did you buy a bunch of games?
I had a cardboard box of games that I was lugging around the airport and waiting for my suitcase to come in, and it did not. But I did have some, and I'm gonna. Can I show them? Is that okay?
I can't believe.
What?
I can't believe you brought. You're like, I brought
props. I brought some.
Like, I feel like people come like, and they're like, okay, I'll just sit and talk. But you went the extra mile. You brought some props. Right,
these are minimal examples. Yeah. So I got 2 of these. So what happens is nobody wants to go home with their stock. Yeah. So the vendors, as the exhibitors, as it's closing, will go around and be like, do you guys want any? Like, do you want any games? So like, I got 2 puzzles, which is very nice. This is, it's a puzzle of one of the famous castles in Germany. They killed this guy, Mad King Ludwig, who made all these castles, and now it's their, what is it? tourism. So I got some puzzles, which is not very gamey, but you know.
Oh, it's gamey.
Yep, and so I got 2 of
This is
those, and
similar.
then I was paid partially in games. So I kind of wish I'd gotten Honey Buzz, but I did come back with not just Merchants of the Dark Road by Elf Creek Games, but also everything for it. So like the Lumi coins and the like special like expansion like pieces and the little cloth bag and the wagon that is like a special for it. So got like the demo copy of that, which is pretty cool. I did bring my copy of Atlantis, but that was just in case. And
You did you just checked it on the plane? You checked the bag?
I did.
The box, rather?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I checked. Well, after I purchased a suitcase that Madrid will have to pay for, I then put everything in the suitcase and checked that bag. Yeah.
Okay.
And let's
Something
see here. Oh, I already talked about. Yeah, Souvenirs from Venice, which is one of the newer Elf Creek, or sorry, one of the newer Oink games.
Oh, I see. Yeah, souvenir. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
it's very much kind of like a combination of their other games, which I love, like Deep Sea Adventure and Troika.
Yeah.
So yeah, Deep Sea
That was the
Adventure.
one, Deep Sea Adventures. That was the one where I was like blown away that it had sold so many
good.
like
Yeah.
copies. I haven't played it, so I should.
You haven't?
check
It's
it
so
out,
good.
yeah.
This is a lot of the same DNA where you're trying to like collect sets of things and get out and get back. And Troika, which is like a little science fiction game about mining a planet and then getting away from it before it implodes.
Wait, are you doing? Is this your like games that you want to talk about?
Oh well, yeah. I mean,
Or do you
are...
have other? Because you talk a little bit more about or do you have other games you want to discuss?
I mean, not really. No, I got.
Okay,
I have
well then
these
let's.
that I brought.
Okay, well yeah. So let's go. I thought you were kind of showing, just showing like things that you got like in terms of your Essen trip. So
Yeah.
but we can we'll talk about these games a little more in depth. I
Sure.
thought you were doing just like a quick over. So what we'll do is you'll talk about your game,
Sure.
and then and you know, just talk a little bit about how it plays, and then what you liked or disliked about it, and then I'll talk about one, and we'll kind of do a little back and forth.
Oh,
So
I see.
yeah,
I
that's
see.
okay. So I thought you were just doing like, hey, these are some games that I got at Essen or
bought.
whatever. But before we go on that, like,
Sure.
I thought to myself, I'm like,
Uh-huh.
because you told me you were going to Essen, and I said, I'm like, would Katie bring back Orleans the big box for me? And I thought that's too much to ask a person.
I don't think I would have been
You
able
would not have
to.
done that, yeah.
No.
Yeah, and then that's the worst of both worlds, because I would have been like, I would have asked you to do it, and it wouldn't have happened, and I would have felt bad both ways.
Sorry.
No, I didn't, because I feel like I'm like, that's a big ask. If it was like this game, maybe. Okay, so why don't you talk about a little bit about this game, about how it plays and what you like and dislike about it.
Right on. So let's see. Souvenirs from Venice. Can we clear some of these?
Oh
away?
yeah,
Is
yeah.
that okay?
Well, we're not gonna do a top down here, but you can. I guess, yeah, you can if you want to. I guess we got the things. So.
I mean, you can.
We can- Whatever you want. You're your own.
Oh, can I?
You could do whatever you
Cool.
want.
Sweet.
There's no rules here. Well,
Sweet.
there's some rules, I guess. But
Some rules.
Yeah.
This is Souvenirs from Venice. I'm gonna show it like this and like back down, and like all Oink games, it is all in this little bitty
crazy.
baby package. And like a good international game, it has like
all
all the
the rules. We'll
all
be
the
talking about
rules
that.
and the different things, and then you basically lay out a grid. I should just get the rules out and show it. You lay out a grid, and then you only have 6 coins. You're trying to get sets of 3 souvenirs. You roll a dice, like every Oink Games dice. It only goes like 1, 2, and 3, and you can only move like that amount. And then once you are in like, let's see, an area, you can purchase. You can either like purchase things hidden, purchase them if they've already been flipped up, or sell a game, or sell a souvenir, and then like remove a coin from there. And then basically you have to like make it back to the airport by the time all of the like panels are flipped up. So yeah, you're kind of like playing against the game. It's very much like their game Deep Sea Adventure or Troika, where you're trying to like make sets of things and then get out before like while the getting's good, basically.
So kind of a little bit like a push your luck, like a
Yes.
Clank or what's the real famous one? Ink and Gold.
Can't stop. Oh, okay. Yes.
Ink and Gold. Oh, Can't Stop is push your luck, yeah, but
Can't
not
Stop is
but not quite as much as like
acceptable.
get out of the thing. It just means stop rolling.
Yeah.
So this is pretty quick to play too, and yeah, you enjoy it. This is what is it? What do you think the coolest thing about it? At least like,
I think the coolest thing about it is that you can prolong the time that you need to get back to the airport by selling souvenirs and then putting pieces face down again, because that kind of like refreshes the time that you have. So when I was playing it last night at the monthly Cudo Plays game night at the Hyatt Place in downtown Champaign, we were basically like kind of like calculating how many turns were left based on how many like tiles were flipped up and actually like were revealed, and then we realized when you sell things, it goes back down face down, so you have more time to be able to like get to the airport.
So you can game it a little more.
You can.
So if you can you get kind of like busted out if everything flips over and you haven't gotten back?
Oh yeah, definitely. I won, and I was the only person who could win because I was the only person who made it back to the airport, and my compatriots were still like in the canals of Venice, so to speak, and did not make it back.
So you're like you're like a boat going around and picking up valuable what is it that you're picking up? Like
You're picking up souvenirs.
But I mean, like, is this like people just dropped it in the water when they were walking? I mean, like
they represent stores. So
I see. Okay, so it's not just okay, gotcha. So, but it plays like what, 2 to 4 people?
I believe so. I'm gonna double check on it here. Yep, 2 to 5 actually.
Interesting. Yeah. It is crazy that like we were kind of chatting recently, also about on an earlier episode about like. Compact games about like my friend went to the Peace Corps and I was trying to find some really compact games to send with her, you know, and like Sail to India was one of the examples I gave because it's like a whole big game but it's in a tiny little box and stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting, like those, they had the Paco games or whatever as well.
Yeah, pack of gum games. And yeah, these are very, very small. And that's partially just because of like, you know, in Japan there's not a lot of space, so you want to like be able to have your compact games. But these days if you go to Target and you buy Deep Sea Adventure there, they actually made the box bigger because this size of game is still like above $20.
Yeah.
And Americans just cannot look at a tiny box and be like, I'm not paying $20.
We talked about that too, that is such a big deal, right?
It is. Yeah.
Any other thoughts before I do mine?
Yeah. Nope.
All right, I'll do my first game, which is Box Top Pinball Haunted House. Now this is ostensibly going to be a series. So speaking of boxes, which is a good little transition, or you know, I guess a bad transition is pointing out the transition and then stalling it all out. So this game you kind of like it's 3 nested boxes and you make like a pinball cabinet essentially, and it's a dexterity game. You can move this box from side to side and flick the dice. You want to see, I have a review and a playthrough actually on this game, but it's like all this retro Halloween art, and it's like it really kind of feels like pinball in a way because, you know, an amateur pinball player like myself, you know, I'm not going to be pro at anything, but like it's very enjoyable to, you know, play pinball, but there is a pretty good amount of randomness, and I kind of feel like that theme tie-in is quite the same. You're flicking these dice down, and it's again a 1, 2, and 3 dice, another little parallel tier game. And you know you're going to score points, but you can also knock those people's dice off or whatever. There's areas where if your die ends up there at the end of the round, you get can get double or triple points for whatever the value is. And then there's an area where it's called the summoning circle where you get more dice. This is like a 10 or 15 minute game, very, very quick. And it's a bit swingy. You know, I don't know how you can have a good intentions, like I'm gonna try to hit these things, and there's holes and things to fall down, there's like pitfalls, but I think it's really fun. It's a cute little dexterity game, very easy to teach. I oftentimes find like these party games and things, which this isn't really a party game, but it kind of is, I guess, because all ages can kind of play, non-gamers can play. Like I say, it looks really great and just easy. You know, it's like one of those things where like it's just something different. And I think for like party games, I'm tired of always like, I love vocabulary based games, but it seems like word games, code names, things like that are always so popular. But I like having a lot of different kind of games like that. So I quite liked it a lot, and I'm a huge Halloween person. My wife and I are big into Halloween, so it's very spot on for us. And like I said, I really am always fascinated by games that use the box as like as a template. I mean, often those are like kind of puzzles where you're like kind of moving the box around or looking through windows or things. Yeah. And I think that's really neat. And there's like a little bit of an ingenuity to it. So I really like that aspect of it. So yeah, I thought it was, and it's like $30 or something at my local game shop. So it's pretty inexpensive, very good just to throw into my party game bag. I can have some party game bags. And so really enjoyed it. Have you seen this or heard of it?
I have not, but I would like to see it. It sounds like a game with a lot of that table presence we were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Awesome.
So do you want to go back up and talk
Cool.
about the other Merchants of the Dark Road, or do you want to talk about a different game?
I have a different one that's kind of silly.
You don't have to have it out here, but you can if you want.
I do want to have it out.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
you can do whatever you want.
Cool. Now, because like Merchants of the Dark Road isn't exactly my favorite of the Elf Creek games, which it is very cool. So I might have like only kind of.
So
these
this
two
is the
sets.
box for this thing?
Yeah.
It has its own little like that's like a nightmare box to
Yeah.
me.
Why is it a nightmare box?
I don't know. It has like a little flap on it and stuff.
Yeah.
So what's the game called?
This is called Cats. And I don't know
Oh, it's
what else
German,
to call
I
it
see.
besides cats. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's in German. So this is kind of, listen, it might be a kid's game. So let's just be
That's
okay
okay.
with
We can
that.
talk about all sorts of things. People like have families or whatever, like
Yeah.
there's all kinds of games out there. It's good to have stuff for everybody. So go ahead.
Exactly. So yeah, it's by Smart Games here. And then what really caught me about like this company is they had a lot of these types of games that are puzzle games. And like how it works is that if I can get it all out here. There we go. Putting this aside. How it works is you have these pieces, and then there are individual little kitty cats
Oh my God.
on the board. And then what you do is you...
These are locked in?
They are not locked in. You go to the little booklet here, and then it tells you where to like put the cats to like start a puzzle, and then you move the cats to where they are supposed to go. They say the color doesn't matter, but I believe it does. And then you put the puzzle pieces where they go as indicated by... Oh, I think I set this up wrong. Hang on. There we go.
This is a solo game?
I'm doing number 5. It
Like
is.
a little puzzle game. Okay.
Yeah, so I got it for like myself to try to like do something that's not on my phone,
Yeah.
and then also for my friend who I knew would be playing a couple of games alone as well. So you just like set it up, and then in the least amount of moves, you try to get all the cats in boxes, and that's it. And it's just so cute.
So this is like 1, 2, and then this cat is off the board, and it's done.
Yeah, you just kind of like figure out exactly how to like.
I see. You have to turn it. I see.
You turn
Okay.
them, and then
So that's one move.
Yeah, that is one move, and it might have been the wrong move. I'm not sure. So.
Okay. First of all, this has a very high toy factor.
Right? It's
Like,
very toyic.
Yeah, and I
cute.
mean, like it's adorable. I mean, it's absolutely adorable.
Can I show
And
her
it can,
camera?
it
I
can,
don't know if
yeah,
I
you can either way.
Yeah, sure.
But I can do the top down too, so you can see. So this is a box it can go into,
Yep.
and this as well. It'll fit in there.
Yep, it does not. The position of the box doesn't matter. I think it's just to
Man,
kind of
that is
like make it
adorable.
cute. It is. They had a lot of like games that were very much like this, and as I was like, because I'm walking by all these booths on my break, like very very quickly to like see things, and
Yeah.
so that's why I gravitate towards Oink, because I know they make games that I love,
Mm-hmm.
and anything else I knew I was gonna have a little bit of trouble with because I don't speak German. And I was kind of worried about, I don't mind explaining games to German speakers, but I was a little bit hesitant about having game explained to me in a different language, but also it was fine. A lot of people speak English anyway. But yeah, I saw this and I was like, kind of like intuit what was
How
going
many puzzles are in
on.
there?
What's that?
How many different puzzles?
Oh
are
my
there?
god, there are so many. So these are the starter ones, and they have all
Oh, they
those
have little-
colors.
yeah, I
So
see.
they go
Get
to
harder.
like medium, harder, and this blue level is called Wizard.
And they don't
So-
tell you like there's no answer key or whatever.
Oh, there's an answer key. Yes,
Okay.
actually, this might be the answer key, but yeah. And then,
So that's there is a real big push these days for games that are like very either completely soloable or very solo friendly. And especially with like a lot of these puzzle stuff. There was something recently I played Cat Crimes, which is a very similar thing. It's like you set up this puzzle. It's like a dinner table, and you try to like you try to move and figure out which cat is the culprit.
Oh.
It gives you a few, so you try to like figure out, because each cat has a different like rule about where it can go. So it's kind of and it's a great theme. Like it's a very like this maybe is more of a puzzle than a game, which is fine. But like I'm really excited about this growing kind of market of like these kind of puzzle games. I love doing like puzzles and activities and stuff. I think it's good to keep your brain moving and stuff. And like you kind of mentioned, it's I'd rather be doing something like this than just mindlessly scrolling on my phone, looking at like memes or whatever. So that's adorable. I really like that.
Yeah. So not exactly a game.
Let's stick on the let's stay on the cat theme, and I'm going to talk about Nekojima. Have you played this one?
I have not. Tell me about it.
So this is a game, again, I've reviewed this on the channel, and my wife and I did a playthrough of it. You can play cooperatively or competitively, which, the competitive, it's a dexterity game. The competitive one, like if you're playing 4 players, 1 person loses and 3 people win. if you're playing cooperatively, 4 people win or lose together. So it's not really that much different. But it's like any dexterity game. Like it's got some weird pieces. This is the theme here is amazing. I'm just going to back up for a second and talk about the theme because do you know what Nekojima stands for? What it means?
I mean, Jima, I'm not sure.
Nekojima.
Neko is cat.
That's correct.
Right? Okay,
Jima,
cool.
if you think of Iwo Jima, like the very famous World War II battle, Jima Island. So it's Cat Island. There's a cat island. There's like, I'm going to forget now, I think it's 120 cats to like 20 people. So, and it's becoming very touristy, as you might imagine, which is sort of has this negative drop, it's changing the island. I asked my wife while we did the playthrough, how many cats do you think are spayed?
Probably none of them.
10.
Oh,
which is like saying none of them.
Yeah.
Maybe I might have that. It's either spayed or neuter, but it's really. You think they would be really policing this, but there's that movie Isle of Dogs. It kind of makes me think of like this Isle of Cats. But very, very wonderful theme. But you're essentially like you're putting these 2 wooden poles, and they have a string attaching them, and you can't touch the string, but you have to roll these dice, and it tells you where each of the poles has to go, and so you'll pick from a pool of different poles basically, and there's 3 different kinds of poles. There's one that has a shorter power line, medium, and long, and it will tell you like you have to pick from short, medium, or long. Like it will say you have to pick long, and then you will be able to pick from a pile of all sorts of different sizes, and you can stack them on top of each other. You can try to go under and do this weird stuff, and obviously you're trying not to knock them over because that's what loses the game. And the cooperative game, like I said, is just as good really, because you have to use some strategy to place things, and you're placing these cats. They have these hooked tails, and you'll place them on the power lines, and of course that will help them to tip over. So that's a bit of a thing. So it's a dexterity game, very simple. 10 seconds to learn it, like it's a very quick 10-20 minute game. Depending on if you do very poorly, you could lose very quickly. But I always as I said, I like the dexterity games. I think they're quite fun, and they're very approachable. The theme, like I love when board games like I learned something, and that's something I learned about, and I was like, I love the dinner party conversations or whatever, where you're like, hey, did you know about this island? Or whatever. I just think that's really fascinating. So it's pretty fun. Are you a big fan of dexterity style games?
I like some dexterity games for sure. But as soon as I try and think of the dexterity games I like, they all just like leave my brain. Oh, there is one that's very significant to me that I love a lot. That I don't know if I'll ever get a copy of, and it's called Bamboleo. Have you ever seen it? Have you ever?
No, I've never heard of it even. No.
You're not gonna believe it when I describe it. It is my favorite game to play at Fancy Gaming at Geekway to the West every year when I go, because no one can sit down on their fancy clothes, and this is a game best played standing up. There's basically like a black kind of like bowling pin. And
I don't believe it. You said I wasn't going to believe it. I was waiting to say that.
There's more.
Okay.
That's flat on top, and then there is a cork ball, and then you take the cork ball and you put that on top, and then there's a big yellow wooden plate. And then on top of the yellow wooden plate, you put all of these individual pieces. There's red pieces and black pieces, and the black pieces are denser, and you just put them on this wooden plate, and then you balance the wooden plate on the ball. And then you have to take the pieces off without tipping it over. And it is so good. That
sounds like it would.
It's impossible. It's wonderful. It's possible.
How many people can take a piece before this thing falls?
I mean, I've seen it get down to a very, very sparse Picasso pizza. That's what it looks like. But you can. Yeah, it's very apparent when it's about to tip, and so it's always really, really striking and amazing when someone is able to take a piece off without it completely tipping over. When
you reach and take the piece, the pressure of you touching the plate is probably the worst part of it.
You gotta do it very carefully, and you just have to be able to grab something and just remove it. And there are some pieces that are easier to grab than others because they're cone shaped or they're triangles, or it's just a brick. One of the pieces allegedly is just a black ball. I've never seen a copy that still has the black ball. I've never, because this is an old game. It was it's from the 80s or something, and it's from earlier than that, actually.
And this is big at Geekway to the West, you said?
I know they have a copy at Geekway to the West, and so I make it big at Geekway to the West because I'm it's a huge deal that there is a copy of Bamboleo here, and we are playing it because I do not see it any other time. But that line has...
Say that again.
Bamboleo. And that, that publisher actually has a number of these dexterity games. There's one called, Hamster Wheel, where it is a wheel, and, you have to, stack pieces in the wheel, and there's some mechanic for how the wheel itself turns.
Yeah, I think I have heard of that one, actually.
Yeah, so same creator, my favorite dexterity game, but I also like It's not. It's Jenga, but it's a role playing game. Dread. Like, have you ever played Dread?
No, but you can talk about that. I'll do one more, and then we'll cap it off.
Do it. Dread's an RPG where the game master is like, telling a story, and the players are characters who are making decisions in the story. And if they make a decision that is a little bit risky, or like takes a lot of like will, or like causes some fear, they have to take a piece from the Jenga tower. And that happens pretty frequently in the beginning, and then sometimes it gets down to like a very, very like nerve-wracking moment, and they have to take a piece from the Jenga tower, and if it falls, the character dies.
So it's just like a D&D session or a one-shot kind of thing.
Yep.
But instead of having the dice and stuff, you're pulling pieces off the.
Yep.
Interesting. That's a really weird mechanism. Like that does seem like a very odd mixture. Like you'd be like, because when I think of role playing, I think like the point is like I'm in the character, I'm embodying this choice of these characters, and I'm playing that role, right? And like I guess like playing a dexterity game. During that sounds almost a little bit strange to me, like, but it's. I mean, if you think it's fun, is it really cool?
You still feel the tension for sure, especially if you have a good storyteller, a good game master. I think you'd like it. I think
so.
It
falls, somebody dies, and then you just keep going.
You build the tower back up, and I think you do have to like remove some pieces to get started again. And then,
is it a bit competitive then, or do you try to help your friends?
I mean, I try to help my friends always. I love a cooperative game, but some people are competitive about it. But I think scary stories are best when we work together. So. And
you're doing this like this is something you're doing. Like for hours and hours, like, or this is just more of a one shot that's like a short game?
More of a one shot that's like about 3 hours. I haven't played it in a minute, but I think you would like
What do you die like in the first like 40 minutes, and then like what happens then?
Come in with a new character. It kind of depends on what the game master wants to do, honestly.
I'm always hesitant for like, okay, player elimination I'm not a huge fan of in general, right? But then if you have player elimination and the game is long, forget that. That is not for me. Almost worse, actually, is like player almost eliminated, where you're like, yes, I'll have to sit here for 3 hours and I have no chance of doing anything enjoyable. I'm just gonna I'm like laying in the corner bleeding, but I can't go outside and like stare at the stars or paint a painting or whatever you want to do while you're.
Yeah, well, the secret to balancing these types of games is to like co-op games, like escape rooms, like Dread, is to make it so people are involved for as long as possible. And if you have player elimination, it's significant, or it's like not until the very end and done in a very dramatic way.
So I'm going to talk about my last game here, which is In the Footsteps of Marie Curie. Have you played this one?
I have not.
Did you play In the Footsteps of Darwin?
No, a lot of scientists.
So this is a game. So I love this concept. Now, we're going to talk next episode, part 2 of which will be out next week. We're going to talk about Cudo Plays with you quite a bit. That's a big topic for that episode. But when I was there at the kickoff meeting, I was talking to somebody about like the idea that they had some game where they were like, it was a game that nobody would want to play. It was about like. I don't remember exactly. I'm just going to give like the vague impression that I had of it, which is something along the lines of like Chicago's, housing inequalities, and it as a game that was written by some professor that's like hours and hours long and dry as that all get out. Yeah. But the concept is like you're going to play this game to learn about the subject, and I think that's a great subject matter for a whole episode, by the way. But like that's such a fascinating thing and a great way to learn. I think. People learn we know about a lot of stuff because of movies, right? And books and things, right? You ask somebody like, well, what do you know about this subject? And they're like, well, I saw this movie, right? Especially historical events and things. Anyway, so I think that stuff's fascinating and I love to learn new stuff. And so, we were going to do this, I was going to do this review and I thought, maybe I should like read up on her a little more because I just know the broad strokes of her career or whatever, her life. But that's the whole point of the game, is that you learn about her and her life, and you go in the footsteps. So half of the game is just this. It's a gorgeous production, first of all. I mean, you have like this cube tower, which is not in too many games. There's like only like 4 games that use it, right? Like this idea that the cubes you put in, some will come out, maybe some will come out on someone else's turn. Shogun famously used it, and some others, but like really interesting kind of thing. And then it has like just beautiful artwork and stuff, but you go through her life, like the time track goes through, and each time it comes with a whole book that you can read about, all of like every year that it hits, you could take the thing and read about what happened in her life that year. So I just think it's fascinating, the concept of like, if you were an instructor or teacher, you just want to learn about something, what a great way to learn, and so from a theme standpoint, from a production standpoint, from the art and everything, what a phenomenal package. The game, very short, maybe 40 minutes or something, depending on the player count, obviously, but less exciting for me. I mean, I didn't dislike the game, but I think it forces you to be very tactical in your decisions. And, there's a substantial amount of luck in terms of what comes out of the cube tower, like the upgrades that you get, in order to make them effective. You have to flip them over and pay costs for them and stuff. And so, maybe you get one that's good or bad or easier or harder. And if you get an easier one earlier, and if if the cube tower produces nothing, there's some ways that you can get some stuff, but not as good. So if players get kind of an early start, you can kind of keep that ball rolling. And if you get punished early on, it's much harder to get started. And so it kind of has a weird constraint married with a bunch of random kind of elements in terms of what cards come out and what cubes come out and the things you can do. So I think it's very tactical, but it feels like you kind of have to ride the wave and then just be like, okay, well, I won or I lost, whatever. I tend to like a lot more agency over my choices, and I like more. I know you need some luck in games, but I tend to like more deterministic games. So I think the gameplay itself, not as good to me, but not bad, but not something I would probably reach for. But the concept of all the other stuff around it, learning-wise, is amazing. But they have one for Darwin as well, so I'm guessing they're just going to keep making these. So you're like, I don't know that much about this person. You can, or you know very little and you want to know more. It's fascinating.
What do you think that next one's going to be? Hawking?
Well, maybe, I don't know. So, I don't know. I wonder if they, obviously, she faced a lot lot challenges based just on being a woman, right? And so she accomplished an insane amount of stuff without, while having that adversity. So, that's for her, that's a really, that's a large, significant part of her challenge, right? And she accomplished so much in life. So I wonder if that would be a focus also, because it's not just teaching you hey, here's this person that did this, like Darwin, right? Came up with did a lot of studies, theories of evolution, etc. But it's you're teaching not just the history of what happened, but also,
the social circumstances around it.
Correct, which hopefully if you learn, you can be a part of changing things in the world. So I think that's a very, so who knows? I don't know. There's a bazillion historical figures they could pick, but I would guess they probably want to stay in that same era.
That'd be cool. And it's an opportunity to kind of correct the record on some, because I know that a lot of Einstein made a lot of his progressions because he also had a wife who was in the field as well.
Interesting.
And was his editor and also took a lot of his notes too. So it'll be, and that is common from male scientists during that time to have
well, Edison did that. Edison was
yeah,
oh yes, that's what you invented. No, now I invented it. So that's a very although Tesla he was a victim of that. Oof. Tesla would be a great one because I think he's a very popular. I love Tesla, and he's a very very popular figure. So maybe he would be a good one. But I think in that era, I think you can't do too recent, right? You got to stay away from too recent.
True.
Although you could think maybe somebody like Oppenheimer or something. Although that movie just came out like last year and stuff. So I think maybe you got to stop around the 60s or so. But I don't know. I think it's fascinating. That's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, cool.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up this episode. We're going to have you back for part 2, which you'll be able to see next week. Where can they find you in the meantime, or if
Where can people find me? Do I want to be found?
That's another really good question.
What a good question, I suppose.
While you're thinking about that, I'll say we will have links for Cudo Plays and Alpha Creek Games below as well, so you can follow those as well. But I guess if you decide you want to, we'll put your information down there.
I'm Kaity Bequette everywhere. It's spelled very strangely, KITYBGOOD. Pretty much anywhere social media exists. And then my alter ego, Magic Missile, is also everywhere as well. So
Magic Missile.
Yeah.
I did notice that. I didn't know your name was spelled like that until I emailed you about coming on, and then I was like, and in your reply, you spelled my name incorrectly.
Oops.
And I was like, how dare you do this thing that I would have absolutely done to you, or maybe even did that to you because you have an alternate spelling.
My apologies. It happens to me a lot too. So
yeah, it's kind of funny.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of funny because I was like, I'm outraged over this thing that like I was also responsible for. Anyway, well, thank you for joining us for today. Next episode, we're going to have you back for part 2, where you're going to talk about Cudo Plays. But thanks for joining us today. And now for now, I got to roll.